Hi friends, Bobby Lanyon here, Jack's dad. No one said it would be easy, but it sure can be rewarding parenting kids with special needs. And today's guest certainly helps us experience that joy, specifically in a special needs family. Her name is Jolene Philo, and she actually co-authored a book just recently with Dr. Gary Chapman, and this book is called Sharing Love Abundantly in Special Needs Families. Now, let me tell you, Jolene has written, this is her sixth book. She's an educator. She has walked the road of being a parent of a child with special needs. She has been involved in education and inclusion and being a mom of a child with special needs at home. She has walked the walk. She knows how to talk the talk, and because she knows what it's like. And I am so privileged to have her on the line. We want to also stay tuned because thank you to Moody Publishers and Jolene and Jack's dad. We're going to give away 5 copies of her just released book, Sharing Love Abundantly in Special Needs Families, at the end of the show. So stay tuned, and you can tell I like this book. I mean, look at all the tabs. These are all the things that I want to have a chance to talk with her. I hope we don't run out of tape because we may be going a long time. Let me tell you, this is one of the coolest books that's so practical about sharing the 5 love languages with our kids and in our families where there is special needs. So let's get Jolene on the line. Jolene, great to see you. How are you?
I am fine. How are you?
Oh, doing great. Thank you so much for joining us here. Did you bring your coffee mug for virtual
I've got my
coffee?
coffee mug right here.
Wonderful. Now, why is that one of your favorite coffee mugs?
I just like the color.
Uh-huh.
It's just such a rich, vibrant color, and I like the pattern, and I like that it's really big, so I can put a lot of coffee in it. I only drink decaf, but we have an espresso maker, so I can really
Mm,
get a good tasting cup of coffee in here.
wonderful. Yeah, it's so important to have like a good amount. I drink espresso as well. The mug I brought to today's conversation is actually from a campground up in
Ah,
Schroon Lake called Word of Life at a
all
place
right.
called the Pines. And when you go camping up there, if you put your coffee mugs out the night before, they come around and they fill it up for you in the morning. So you can wake up, go right out of your camper or of one of the little bungalows they have, and there's a fresh cup of coffee. So,
That sounds more like glamping than camping.
well, that's my style. That's my
Yeah,
style.
mine too.
So, but you have just co-authored this book with Dr. Gary Chapman called Love Abundantly in Special Needs Families." You can see that I've read it well. One of the first books in a very long time that I have read from cover to cover within 3 days. So I just I love it, and I hope we have enough time to go through everything that I wanted to go through. But share with me a little bit about your what motivated you, or what was the catalyst in your heart? Not so much like you'll talk to people and people say, "Yeah, you should write this book. Yeah, you should write this book." But what was the catalyst in your heart to motivate you to put such a piece together and jump off the 5 love language platform?
Well, my there's a couple steps in my motivation. My motivation for any of the books I write is the memory of when our child was young. Our first child had some major birth defects and had a lot of surgeries. He's fine now. He's 38, almost 39, doing well, out on his own, working, has a family. But I remember 1982 through 1985 when he was sick,
Mm,
and I couldn't find anybody or anything about parenting a child with medical issues. There was
mm.
just nothing, and there was no internet yet then, so it was really hard to find
Yeah,
anything.
and it's probably very lonely for you.
It was very lonely. And we were in a very remote area of South Dakota, and so there just weren't a lot of people to talk to. So when we moved from South Dakota to Iowa, where we live now, and I was teaching, I kept thinking, as my child got better, I kept thinking, there's all these parents with all these kids, and nobody's writing for them, and they need something, and somebody should be writing a book. And it was a long time before everything was in place, but it was just like I felt God tapping me on the shoulder and saying, maybe you're the one to write that book. And so my first book came out, and I've written 4 other books since then, before this one. And I also have a blog for parents called differentdream.com. And I have a lot of guest bloggers who blog for me, and they're parents of kids with special needs. And one of those emailed me one day and said, when are you going to write the love languages version for special needs parents? And I was like, that is the best idea. And so I emailed my agent. She's like, that's a great idea. And thankfully, one of the other authors she worked with in her agency wrote the military version of the love languages book with Gary Chapman.
Okay.
So my agent knew who to contact, and we started. We contacted them and immediately got an email back from them saying, Dr. Chapman has wanted to write a book about this for a long time, because he always talks to parents who ask him about it, and he doesn't have the expertise. He's been waiting for someone to come along.
Oh, I'm so glad you fulfilled it.
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
Where, it's like you realize you just got on the slide and you're going down. You're on for the rest of the ride.
One of the things I so appreciate, and I think this is because as a parent who has, Jack was born with Down syndrome. He's now 11. You don't need so much philosophical thoughts. We don't have the energy for philosophical thoughts. We just need to know, okay, we want to love our kids. We want to help them grow. Just tell me how I can do it, and tell me like the thing that I love that it's pretty much almost all of your book is parents and how they implemented the 5 love languages.
Yeah. And that's the way to do it. I mean, you go to the people who are in the trenches and have figured out ways to thrive and survive where they are. And they have the best ideas. There's no way I can do it all. And I can't, my child's condition was different than Jack's with Down syndrome and with someone who has a child with cerebral palsy or whatever it is. But we all have more in common than is different among us. So by finding parents and families with a wide range of disabilities and special needs within them, we can bring those people together and share what they know and just create a much stronger bond among us all.
Yeah, that's so amazing. In fact, before I go any further, I do not want to forget that we're actually going to give away some of your books to some of our viewers. And so what I thought would be really cool, since we're talking about community and bringing everyone together, it'd be really great. Post a picture of you and your child with special needs on the Jack's Dad Facebook page with this video, and we'll get in contact with you. We'll randomly select 5 of you viewers you guys follow us so wonderfully. You guys connect with us so well. And so Jolene, Moody Publishers, and here at Jack's Dad, we want to give away 5 books. So if you would like one of these books written by Jolene, Philo, simply take a picture with you.
And Gary Chapman.
And Gary Chapman. And Gary wouldn't mind that I forgot his name in there. Take a picture of you and your child with special needs and put that up on Facebook, and let's celebrate this community that we're so blessed with. So Jolene, I'd like to just go way back to the beginning in early in the book, but one thing that you mentioned, which I think is very profound, is that there's a time for implementing love and being intentional, and there's a time to just kind of back off, and that is after the diagnosis.
and that was again wisdom from some of the parents I interviewed. Um, that they said, don't parents are hurting. They're trying to figure out what life is going to look like. They're very much like, we're recording this during the COVID-19 shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
They're at that same point our whole nation was at, and our whole world was at, when things started shutting down and we realized the magnitude of this pandemic, and we're all trying to figure out what's life going to look like in the future, what's it going to be like. That's exactly where special needs parents are when they get a diagnosis for their child.
Right.
And so that is not the time to say, oh, come on now, let's implement this and let's do that and start having a date night and learn your child's love language. None of us, with the shutdown, we're at that point. Didn't it take a week or two for all of us to figure out, okay, we need to get a new routine. We need to kind of see what's in place and what we need to do. And then as you kind of gradually get used to the situation, you can start moving forward again. And it's the same with those parents after a diagnosis. Give them some time. Give yourself time, if you're the parent, to process it. And you don't have to start everything immediately. And then when you're ready, you can start looking at things like using the 5 love languages with your family, or whatever other tools you want to start using to heal.
Yeah, that's so wise. I mean, I remember when Jack was born, we were basically told that, we didn't expect to take him home, which was just old information that a doctor had about Jack's diagnosis, which, set us back in our minds and in our hearts so much further. But it took Michelle 6 months before she was comfortable with having early intervention to come into the home. 6 months to get used to that process. And that at the time, you're just like, man, all I want to do is just stay in bed for a little while, and we, in our go society, we push forward motion so much. And, especially in this COVID-19 phase that we're in, we can't really go forward. We are forced to stay still and slow down. And I think that's something that God's given us to handle when you get smacked in the face with something that you weren't expecting, and your expectations they're not fulfilled in any way, shape, or form. Figuring out how to let go of, grieve those expectations and look forward, it takes time.
It does, yeah. And we have to come to a place of acceptance. If you think of the different stages of grief, we have to work through all of those denial and bargaining and anger and finally get to that stage of acceptance. But we can't expect ourselves or anyone else to get there in one day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or a week or a month. Or,
yeah.
6 months for your wife, that makes a lot of sense to me. Because also, she needed to get to know Jack.
Mm-hmm.
She needed a chance to mother him, and you needed a chance to do the same thing, to develop that bond. And that's hard to do when you've got people coming in all the time.
Yeah. My sister, back in Australia, my oldest sister, she told me one time on the phone, Jack was still in the hospital. I remember this because I got so angry when she said it to me. She said, "It's okay to grieve." And I was like, grieve? Like, are you kidding me? I don't want to grieve. But after a little while, I looked back and I was like, man, that's exactly what I needed to do. And because my expectations of reality were so misguided, they were built up really in my own mind. So now there's also an element in the family. Now Jack is our second born, but you spend a really good amount of time in the book talking about siblings. And I think siblings in families where there's someone with special needs, man, they are the unsung heroes.
Yeah, they really are. And they sometimes are the forgotten heroes, not unsung, but forgotten. Now, our son was our first child, and we didn't have our daughter until 6 years later. And by then our son was doing quite well. So, they were raised more like both of them being typical siblings. We didn't have a lot of that except for surgery our son had when he was 15. But I grew up in a caregiving home, and my father was disabled with multiple sclerosis and in a wheelchair from as long as I can remember. So we did a lot of his care. My sister and brother and I helped mom with a lot of dad's care. And to an extent, that's okay. And I want parents to realize that it's okay for siblings to come in and care and learn how to relate to their special needs sibling. But those kids also are kids, and we were kids when I was a kid. And there were a lot of things we didn't get to do. And there were, we never got to go camping with our parents. Had it not been for an aunt and uncle who came in and took us camping, we wouldn't have had that experience. We did a lot of work that other kids didn't have to do. And I want parents to realize that the typical siblings are kids, and they need to have a childhood.
Yeah.
And so we can use the love languages to help them have a childhood, and that's so important.
It really is. We talk a lot in our family about within the five of us about we really don't want taboo subjects. And so we actually did a video with my youngest son, Connor, who's 8, about what it's like to be a sibling. Mm-hmm. And I tell my boys, my oldest son and my youngest son, hey, I didn't grow up with a brother with Down syndrome, so I don't know what it's like to be a brother of someone with Down syndrome. My journey is I'm the dad in this journey. So, you tell me what it's like. Share with me when it just stinks and share with me when it's really cool, So I really appreciated that you spent really good, just practical advice on how to encourage kids, siblings. So another thing you talk about is really you hone in on how parents of kids with special needs can translate the love languages to educational and medical professionals.
Yes, and that was really important to me because I taught school for 25 years.
And I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah. So I taught school, and I had a lot of kids with special needs mainstreamed in my regular ed classroom.
Sure.
And then my husband is a nurse, and so he's in the medical field. And what I found was that there were the parents I interviewed, they were way ahead of me and had figured out ways to integrate the love languages into their education, into their kids' IEPs, which I thought was brilliant, and even sneak it in when their kids were in the hospital or they had therapy appointments or whatever. And the main thing that they all said, and of course every interview was conducted separately from every other one, but I kept hearing the same thing over and over. It was that you have to figure out how you're going to take the love language concept and the vocabulary with it and kind of translate it into professional talk, because then the professionals will pick up on it. Yeah. So words of affirmation in an IEP, if you have a words of affirmation kit, you call that positive reinforcement.
Yep.
Or, which I just love. Yeah. Or if they are physical touch.
This one was my favorite.
I know. There were a lot of them where the kids were physical touch, and the parents knew that the kids needed to learn appropriate physical contact at school. So they had written into IEPs that, so-and-so is going to learn a first grader, what are appropriate hugs at school and how many he can give a day. Or for a 16-year-old, no hugging at school is really appropriate, and they want him to learn correct social behavior. And so his IEP he's going to learn these different things he can do instead of hugging someone, a high five, a handshake, a fist bump, and many other things. There were things like they need deep massage during therapy, and all sorts of different things that they came up with. I just was amazed at these parents who are like you, in the thick of things, trying to figure out life, you know, overwhelmed sometimes, way busy, and yet they've thought of all these amazing and brilliant ways to implement the love languages.
Yeah, we one thing that we did with Jack's IEP very early on, I think it may have been his first IEP meeting that we were in, is we actually put together a little kind of like what you have at the back of your book, kind of like this is a who Jack is. You know, Jack is a boy. He loves cars. You know, he loves trucks. He really loves this movie, and he talks about it all the time. And these are his favorite characters. And you know, he's got two brothers who he just absolutely adores. And so we tried to take. They do the FBA, the functioning behavioral analysis, and they put that all in there in acronyms that, man, you got to be in school for a long time to figure out what to use, how they're used, and then we just wanted life to be into that IEP, because we knew that we weren't going to be there every day. And let's say a substitute came in, or he had a different aid that day, or something changed in his routine. Someone could pick up that document and they could read, okay, these are his goals, and this is his specially designed instruction, and that kind of. But this is who Jack is, and this is what he responds to, and I just, it's it's really neat to see that it's now it's living on the pages of your book, that other parents can take that into that educational environment. So the deep tissue was my favorite.
Oh, good. Well, the other thing is, we want our kids, when they're at school, to feel loved, or if they're in the hospital, to feel loved and secure, because if they do, they're going to learn better and they're going to heal better. So why wouldn't we do that? And I can tell you that teachers, the vast majority of teachers, want to do everything they can to help children learn. And so if we as parents can kind of clue them in on what motivates our kids and how they best respond, we've just made their job easier. Yeah. They appreciate that because they work hard.
Right. And not, it's so amazing. There are some incredible teachers out there. And I would agree with you that a very, very small percentage of teachers aren't interested in showing up every day. Like every teacher that I've ever met goes to school every day, stays up late, prepares for their school. I mean, they are so dedicated to these children. Jack's teacher currently, well, in Pennsylvania now, they've shut the schools for the rest of the year. But Jack's teacher currently has basically, as a class, have put in place standards that Jack needs to learn of how to appropriate himself socially. And so, sometimes he will like bang, or he'll like try to make a quip at somebody and then look around for like feedback, like, hey, is anybody going to laugh at that? And so as a class, they've agreed that when he does things that are not socially appropriate, just to ignore him. Like, don't even look at him. And so he'll look around and he's all disappointed that he's not getting the feedback or the chuckles from, and it, within 2 days, his whole behavior had changed, because he's like, oh, well, that's not fun, and so the teacher, the point is, the teacher knew that Jack was so peer motivated, which all kids are, typically developing kids, and she has used that so creatively to channel Jack's understandings, and hey, this is how we behave in the classroom. It's just brilliant.
And I imagine that there's another piece to that. Not only do they ignore his inappropriate behavior, when he does something appropriate, I imagine he gets some real positive feedback.
Yes, he does get the positive feedback. You're right. One of the things that I really want to get your feedback on is that You talk a little bit in your book about how a family who have special really needs, and basically is the life source of external support.
Yes. Yeah.
Share with me a little bit on that.
That is such a huge thing. One of the major things that happens to families after a special needs diagnosis, or, even before the diagnosis, if they're really dealing with behaviors or whatever in a child, they become very isolated. It might be because the child is medically fragile and they can't get out. It might be because the child has behavior issues or mental health issues that are going on. It can be that it's just so hard to
And
get out
exhausting.
the door. Yeah, it's exhausting in the house. So to get out the door and go to the park to play, or,
Mm-hmm.
find somebody to care for your kids so you can go out for supper with friends, it just, eventually you just kind of pull back and just stay home because it's easier and you're exhausted. And so isolation gets to be an issue. And the more isolated a family becomes, the more forgotten they become by their friends, their neighbors, co-workers that maybe go out socially, their church family if they can't get to church. And it's not, I don't think people are actively trying to exclude.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a function of the circumstances. And those people don't know that the families are too busy to ask for help and probably too proud. And so part of the reason that is in the book is because I want other families, other people to read this book and to realize, oh, I can reach into this family and I can provide that support, because without the support, the family will just flounder. And another thing that happens without support is that the child with special needs doesn't have a network of friends. Not only do the parents not have a network, but the child doesn't either. And the hard reality of parenting a child with disabilities is that they may outlive us as parents.
Yeah.
And need to be sure that they have a rich support network of their own as they grow into adulthood and beyond, so that when we are gone, they still have people around them. So yeah, I really want the world to realize that you can reach in, and you may have to ask a bunch of times before somebody will say yes. And you may just have to say, no, I'm just coming over for a little bit. I'm going to chat. I don't care if your child has a meltdown on the floor. I'm still coming over because you matter. So we can do that if we need to.
Yeah. It's interesting. Previous generation, like growing up, and this was a bit of a culture shock for me when 15 years ago, when I moved to the US and got married. I would say to Michelle, hey, let's go and see so-and-so. Let's pop in and see how John and Susie are doing, and she would say, well, we should call first. I'm like, why? Like, I mean, growing up in Australia, there was always a kettle to be boiled. There was always tea ready to be steeped, and there was always cookies ready to be pulled out of the freezer. And there's something about that element in society where the front door is never locked. And I love that. I still pop in on people. More than not, they don't answer. I don't know if they do that on purpose. Probably do, because I eat a lot of cookies. But I love that you just mentioned that, hey, just go in, knock on the door, see how people are doing. Like, I think that is one of the most important things that this whole conversation is. Like, don't forget the families who have kids with special needs. A lot of the times that we don't go out, we're just too tired. We are just flat out too tired as parents. And going back to the sibling element, the siblings don't get the social interaction. The typically developing siblings, they don't get to go out as much. They don't get to play sports, because we're just too tired. Like, honestly, it's so exhausting that, we do swimming all together now. It's either all or nothing.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. In fact, I'm right now working on a new book proposal for a book about the effects of care and compassion fatigue and stress on caregiving parents.
oh
Um,
wow,
yeah, yeah. So I just sent my agent the proposal for her to look over and get back with revisions, and we're going to start shopping it around to publishers. So
man,
because it's a huge issue,
it
it's
is.
huge.
It
Hmm.
is, and it's amazing that there's studies that have been done where caregivers, like I didn't have a gluten intolerance issue until a year after Jack was born. I mean,
Yeah.
the adrenal fatigue and the fact that the adrenal system doesn't heal itself.
Hmm.
Once it's spent, it's spent. There are so man that we'll definitely cover that one
Yeah.
when that
Yeah.
one comes out. So that's fantastic. Jolene, is there anything that we can share with our viewers that you would like to absolutely nail home that our viewers get to take with them?
I just want to let them know that if they think it's hard or impossible to determine the love language of a child with special needs, even a child who's nonverbal,
Mm-hmm.
the parents I interviewed for this book figured out ways to determine their kids' love languages. And if they could, they used one of the quizzes that are in the book or the game that Dr. Chapman has come up with for younger children. But if none of those work, um, they would observe their kids and just use one love language for a couple weeks and note how they responded. And they would look for the one that really seemed to bring their child alive, motivate them. And if you still aren't sure at the end of that, when you've tested all five, one of the moms had the most golden questions I have ever heard. And you ask yourself, which of these calms my child? Which love language calms my child? Which love language motivates my child? And which love language includes activities that my child chooses to do,
Mm.
that we choose for them, but that they choose. And at the end of those three questions, you'll probably know your child's love language. But if you still can't figure it out, or your child's developmental level is, 5 years and younger, just use all the love languages with kids. Because as Dr. Chapman says, in those years, they need all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, this book is one of the most practical books that I have read in a very long time. Not only just the stories, but there's quizzes and to help not just for our children with special needs, but for all our other children, and even between husbands and wives to learn, the love language between husbands and wives. So, Jolene, this is amazing. We're going to give 5 of these books away. So take a picture of yourself with your child with special needs, put it up on Jack's Dad Facebook page, and we will randomly select 5 people, and we'll connect with you to send this book written by Dr. Gary Chapman and Jolene. Jolene, thank you so much. We're going to list Jolene's websites. We're going to put a resource at the end of the video listing your other books that you've written, and I highly encourage our viewers to go check out Jolene's blog and read as much as you can, because I've been on there a lot and just so encouraged. Jolene, you have walked the road, and we just are so thankful for the way you take segments of that and you just break it down for us who coming along behind you, and you're making it so much easier.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I'm really looking forward to going to your page and seeing pictures of all your listeners. That makes me so happy.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Jolene. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.